Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Deborah Hatswell, and you're listening to BBR Investigations. I wasn't safe in my room at night. Something was always standing in the corner. Today, I want to share with you some of BBR's creepiest case reports, many of them new to you, and some that have never been heard in public before. I will also share some of my earlier experiences as a child, coming to terms with things in my room. And to be honest, each of these cases resonate deeply with me. 5 decades ago, I thought I was the only kid in the world who experienced horrible things in their bedroom at night that became so difficult to deal with and to never be understood or believed was so confusing and frustrating. The events themselves are hard enough to live with and impossible to explain, but to be then constantly disbelieved over and over has an effect on a child's inner growth and self-worth. So many of you know what it's like to get ready for bed and be terrified of what was to come. As a parapsychologist, my experiences, personal and professionally, enable me to empathise with anyone who suffered and endured this endless nightly torture. Every day I meet someone who has a tale to tell me about something they saw at home growing up. The lucky ones see positive things, or they'll see something negative only once or twice, while others endure it 24/7. Each witness and case you'll hear tonight are unique, with the common denominators being fear and tension, and in some cases abject terror. Let's start with a young lady who knows just what it's like to be scared of your own bedroom at home. This account's titled, "It Stood Over Me When I Was Enveloped in Pitch Darkness, and Then I Was Fighting for My Life." Our witness is going to go tonight by the name V. And V said, "Hi Debbie. First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for giving me your time in reading my email. I know you're really busy, and I listen to all of your podcasts, and I think you're amazing and a great narrator. You give great comfort to people, and you're never judgmental of anyone. So I feel comfortable reaching out to you. Since I found the paranormal community online, I've felt so much less alone with my own experiences. Most of my friends don't have an interest in the unexplained, or they have had no paranormal experiences themselves, so it just doesn't resonate with them as it does with me. I'll tell you my experiences chronologically. I think they're pretty bland compared to what others have been through, especially from listening to other people's experiences. I mean, I would disagree with her on that point, and you'll understand that as I read more. She said, "My first strange experience happened when I was a young child. I think I was 5 or 6 years old at the time. I was brought up in the village of Snayton, and we lived in the Crescent near Wildale Woods. I remember one time distinctly, I was waking up in the middle of the night, and I found myself looking over to the opposite side of the wall from my bed where all my toys were. For some reason, I felt very afraid, and I really wanted my teddy. I ran over to where my toys were, and I put my hands out in the dark searching for it. And I remember very clearly something grabbed my wrist firmly, and it would not let go. I was so scared. I felt unseen hands around my wrist gripping me. I tugged and pulled my wrist away, and eventually whatever it was let go of my wrist. I turned on the light, but there was nothing there, just boxes of toys. I ran into my parents' room and got into bed with them, and that had become a nightly routine for the next few years. I was always waking up in the night and running to their bedroom and jumping into bed with them. I remember telling my mum about the monster in my room, but she just dismissed it. I'm 48 years old now, but I still remember it clearly. My teenage years and 20s were a difficult time, and my two experiences in those years reflect this. I think I attracted more negative energy as I was unhappy and mixed up. I was a young teenager, about 12 or 13 years old, when a group of my friends thought it would be fun to play on the Ouija board. We had no idea how dangerous it was to do that. It was just giggles and fun at first. We do it regularly, just thought it was a game, thinking one of us was pushing it. And when you're that age, you're so silly and you like being scared. I remember never believing it was real. It was just a game. For some reason, I then decided to play the Ouija board by myself in my brother's bedroom. I was alone in the house, and I remember the cold to the bone horror, shock, and fear I felt when the glass started to glide aggressively and erratically around the board, with only my finger resting slightly on it. I was not pushing it. This was no longer a game. This was real. I can only describe it really like there was a magnet under the board suctioning the glass down onto the board, and it was moving with purpose and force. It was gliding fast and erratically across the board in straight lines towards the letters, trying to spell something out to me. I stopped doing it immediately. I took the glass outside and I threw it in the garden. I know, without any doubt, this is real. Looking back at the experience, I believe that I opened the door to something negative. Whatever was pushing that glass was coming through me as the glass moved with force when my fingers were near it, barely touching it. I was really shaken up and I never touched it again. My next experience happened when I was 20 years old and I was staying at my boyfriend's at the time parents' house in Stourbridge in the West Midlands. I was staying in the spare bedroom by myself, and his parents' bedroom was downstairs. I don't think it was a really old house, maybe a 1960s build, but I'm not sure. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I had no idea what time it was, but I was definitely wide awake. The moonlight was shining in the room, and it was very cold. I saw in the corner of the room a human figure. It was tall and muscular, although I couldn't see it clearly. It was like a black and white hologram, almost static. I remember clearly thinking, am I dreaming? Is this real? I scrunched my eyes up and I turned to the wall and I looked back again. I was fully awake. The figure was still stood there staring at me. I was absolutely terrified and in shock. I remember clearly being terrified as it started to walk towards me in an almost robotic way. I saw its legs and arms moving, almost like the Tin Man from the Wizard of the Oz film. It was in the form of a human, but it was not human. It had no face, just darkness. Whatever it was felt very evil. It stood over me, and I was enveloped in its pitch darkness. And the next thing I remember, I was fighting for my life. I remember that my soul lifted out of my body. I felt myself bouncing down onto the floor with this thing over me. I was fighting it off with everything I had, but I eventually could not fight anymore and I gave up. Once I just accepted it, I felt myself enveloped in light and pure love. I felt my body, my soul lift up away from this thing of pure darkness and evil, and I astral projected away from it. I floated out of the bedroom and down the corridor. I then came to in my bed. I must have lost consciousness when it spiritually attacked me. I sat up in bed. The stifling, suffocating atmosphere had gone. The room was normal again. I know it sounds like it was a bad dream, but I know 100% that I was wide awake and what I saw was real. I've told people before, but they just dismissed it as a dream. I do think I've lost consciousness and my soul was taken from my body when it attacked me. I've never really known what happened to me or what it was. I never experienced anything like that again. My other experiences involve seeing orbs that are electrically charged and lit up, part of the room. I'll email you again, Debbie, with these experiences. Thanks for listening. My kindest regards. I cannot tell you how much I emphasise with this witness. To be a small child in your own bed at night is supposed to be the safest place you can be. We are taught that nightmares are not real. There are no such things as monsters and ghosts. And if you press the subject because you've seen them, your parents will at some point decide that you're just looking for attention or being plain defiant, if you're me, when you don't sleep at night. If I had known then that not fearing what haunted me would take away its power, I wouldn't know what to do. Because that's exactly what its agenda is. It's a feeder, a negative vacuum, a psychic vampire, an entity, a being of many names that shows is your worst fear to terrify you the most. The second our witness let go and lost her fear, it was powerless. She didn't have to fear it any longer. I've no doubt she'll have had other experiences she finds hard to explain in life, and I'm hoping over time she'll share them with me. I know just how she felt. When I was around 7, we moved into a new flat closer to Beulah Park, and I used to watch a show back then called Josie and the Pussycats. My dad bought me like a cut-out magazine where you cut out the paper doll and then you'd put out the clothes and you'd balance them on the figures using little tabs. I remember playing with it all day, and I put them on the bedroom cupboard and called it a sideboard. And then I went to bed. I remember waking up because the room was freezing. I got out of bed, put my coat on, and got back in bed. Now, it was a cold place. It had 2 floors, 2 levels, and the only heat was in one downstairs room below. There was no other fires or radiators or anything like that. And in winter, the windows would freeze. So I'd often have to have my coat on when I was playing. We all did. But this cold was on another level. Like, it made you cold on the inside. I just lay there with my feet on my hot water bottle and the rest of me frozen. And I looked towards the dresser and the paper figures were moving. Not like a girl band, not like Josie and the Pussycats, more like robotic zombies. They were juddering and moving closer and closer to the edge of the dresser. Thankfully, I was only scared for a minute, and by this time I was so sleep deprived, the constant activity made me so mad. I projected my anger onto those paper figures, and they stopped. I don't remember falling asleep, to be honest, but I'll never forget that night, 49 years later. As I aged and went into my teenage years, things changed for me, and I was able to shut it down somewhat for a while, at least. I noticed Fee said she was around 13 when she was with the friends, and they decided to try the Ouija board. This is a time in a female's life when her energy changes. She's becoming an adult, and her energy will be confusing and hard to handle. It's why teenage girls suffer very badly with anxiety. The signs that their inner self is picking up on are correct, but society tells them it's their fault, or they're feeling it wrong, and they need to accept the limitations that anxiety breeds. Just take the pills, push it down. It's one of the reasons we have poltergeist activity. There is usually a young teenage girl or a slightly older boy, as it happens a little later for them, in the home, and it's their energy that is setting off, like a catalyst, the activity that's happening around them. Not purposely, but they are a primed weapon with no control on the trigger, no training, they haven't been schooled. We humans are capable of great things, if only we knew it. And our teenage years shape how our journeys go. To be equipped with the knowledge that everything you're feeling and seeing is valid and correct would have made a world of difference for me and others like me. I spoke with a young mother recently with a list of things happening around a new home, as a young son was seeing things in his room at night. I explained how we had to put the power into his hands. With everything that was going on, we had to prioritise. So we prioritised the child and what's happening to that child in his room. I said we need to be able to take his fears away. And if he's seeing something in his room, which turned out to be a strange man, that must be terrifying for him. I think intuitively, his mum knew exactly what to do. But she was unsure of herself and needed some confirmation, hence she contacted me. She'd already put into place a plan to redecorate his room so that it was brighter and lighter, and more importantly, his. She went into his room and had a word with the old chap who was visiting. She explained she knew he meant no harm, but he'd frightened a little boy, so she asked him not to show himself again to the children. I then advised her to buy him a torch, and when he felt scared or saw something in the room that was frightening, to light it up bright and white. It's not the torch that's the power. That's just the implement used to concentrate his intent. Things are much calmer now. And here's the report in full. And she said, Hiya, I saw your video about creatures that are stalking the Welsh mountains, and I wanted to get in touch as I need help here at home. We live next to the mountain, and we're having some really odd experiences that are happening in our garden. It's next to an old meadow with the mountains behind it. We live in a relatively new house, which is in an old village, surrounded by disused tin mines. The river flows through there, and lots of meadows. When we first moved into the house, I became aware of a curious visitor. It was a humanoid-like thing, very tall, but it was ashen white in colour. It had very long, thin arms and legs and a long face, with a large, wrinkled forehead, and it wandered through our home and watched us in our beds for a few nights. I'd catch it out of the corner of my eye often. It seemed almost alien-like, but like it had been here longer than anything we know. It didn't seem malicious, just ancient and curious about the new inhabitants, and after a week or two, it went away by itself. It was almost like the spirit of the mountain was visiting us. A while later, both my parents and I experienced some strange electrical disturbances in the house, lights turning on and off, and strange cold spots happening. We have had quite a few power cuts too. That all seemed to pass as well. Not long after moving in, I went to explore the meadow at the back of the house, finding an old fire circle beside a very mature oak tree. It had a strange, almost sinister feel to it, witch-like, and not the good kind, and I've not ventured up there since. There's a forest close by, which seems impenetrable, and it houses owls and cuckoos and other raptors. The meadow immediately to the side of our house also carries a strange vibe, and for a long time we thought we could hear people out there. We just assumed it was kids or drunks. I lived with my baby alone in the house for a year as my partner was working away, and I often had the feeling that something was watching my baby while he slept in the nursery. On a few occasions, I felt the need to rush into him and shoo away whatever it was, which felt malicious, doing whatever I could to generate a field of protective energy around him. That might be normal for new mothers, though, I don't know. Although his nursery has long had a strange cold vibe to it, often we'd see unexplained movement and orbs on his baby monitor. We just dismissed it as dust. He's never felt comfortable sleeping there. One night recently, he said he didn't want to stay in his room in case the bad man came back. We didn't force him to stay there, and I've recently looked to redecorate to see if it improves things. It could just be his imagination since starting school, though, and he has a genuine reluctance to sleep alone. He also told us of other children he sees in the house, mentioning a girl called Anna. Now, there's no one in his class by that name, and no one we know in his life that could explain this. Very recently, a strange spot appeared on his bedroom wall, almost like mould, but with no source at all. There was no leaking pipe, no identifiable source of moisture. Two plumbers couldn't explain it. We cut it out about 2 weeks ago and replaced the plasterboard. And after that, strange things started in the garden. Quite recently, we had an angry neighbour move in who was being so intrusive, all the neighbours had to install CCTV. The energy, she admits, is powerfully negative. Early on, while checking the depth of night vision on the CCTV, I saw two large eyes, quite wide apart, that appeared to be looking over the neighbour's fence. The next day, we found scratches all up our side of the fence, but with trellis on top, it's hard to see how such a large animal, like a badger, would be able to climb over without wrecking it all. Other items, like large furniture and pots, have also been moved around our garden, but this was before the CCTV was fitted. They're also too heavy for the wind or an animal to move, and it just remains unexplained. The scratches remain unexplained, and they're bigger than a cat or a rat would make. On at least 3 occasions, she said, I felt hunted when I've been in the garden. My partner has had similar experiences. They all happen late at night. It's given us both the chills, a feeling we haven't experienced since we were kids. In recent weeks, it's been palpable every night, and one night I looked out into the garden and was surprised to see what looked like a black goblin creature, about 1/2 metre in height, crouched on the roof of the shed watching me. It seemed to have long, thin legs. I described it as a gargoyle. I haven't seen it since, and the oppressive feel in the garden now seems to be lifting. For a few nights, neither of us wanted to go out at all, only feeling safe in the house, even with the lights on in the garden. A big storm seems to have cleared the air a bit last week, but the creepiness is still lingering a bit. Strange noises are all more frequent now too, some of which would suit the soundtrack to The Walking Dead. They're far louder and worse than foxes, or some kind of bird, eerie whistling. The birds and owls have been quieter recently too, but maybe that's just autumn settling in. It's all probably illusion and paranoia on my behalf, but enough to have us talk about it and now Google it and speak to you about it. Both my partner and I have had separate experiences. We both revealed those to each other today. This week, it hasn't felt safe to go in the garden at night. There are strange noises, whistlers, branches snapping. We know there are badgers in the meadow, but there just doesn't seem to be badgers. There's a real malign feeling to it too, like we're being hunted by some sort of entity. The shed creature was maybe 1/2 metre, crouched by the way. I couldn't tell you how big it would be standing up. Also, my lad's bedroom is nearest to the meadow behind the house. We thought it'd be peaceful, but it hasn't turned out that way. I think there are a few things at play here. First, we have old ancient land at the bottom of a mountain. So this would have been a place of worship and usually a burial place for our ancestors. This place, long ago forgotten, has been built upon. We have a new mum who herself said her energy had changed when she became a mother. I also picked up on the fact that she said her and her husband hadn't felt that scared before, other than when they were children, which tells me that they've experienced something frightening when they were kids. And that's exactly as it goes. Then we have a very young child who's seeing things in his room at night. And as he gets older, the old man becomes more of a nuisance. Now, this could be just a visiting elder, hence I didn't advise doom and gloom and casting solutions. It's quite natural for our elders to visit, especially the young. They hold a certain joy even for the ones that are passed on. But they can also attract the negative, as they themselves are completely pure. So encouraging anything negative is the opposite of what I advised. We put the control back into mum's hands. So she knows what she's feeling and experiencing is legit. If I march in with a team, that's just a band-aid, that at best, and at potential a hornet's nest of energy left open in the home. It's far better that I show her how she was correct all along. She was intuitive. She did the right thing. She'll deal with this herself as things happen. When she becomes an older lady like myself, she'll undergo another change of energy, the age of the crone. I wear that badge with pride. I've earned it over the years, and I've got the scars, both physical and mental, to prove it. The crone, after all, is the one who wears the crown. It's the same for men and boys. They too suffer with things in the room at night, and as they age into teenagers, they can be plagued by dark forces. I've spoken with men who've had objects thrown at them in the rooms. They've had their blankets and bedding pulled from the beds. Some even suffer levitation events. Several of them have been physically punched, kicked, or dragged, often with accompanying bruises. One young man I'm in contact with who lives in Wales, an undisclosed location, he shared his experience with me in April of 2023, and the adult he shared with acted very differently with him and made his fears valid, which is really rare, I think, and very refreshing. He said, in approximately 2008, I had something happen to me that I struggle to explain to people even now. This experience happened when I was 15 years old. At the time, I lived with my dad and his girlfriend, who had 5 kids, aged between 2, 10, and 10. 3 girls and 2 boys. None of these were my dad's children, but he took care of them as if they were. So we had 8 of us living in a 3-bed house. My dad and his girlfriend had a bedroom on the first floor. The 3 girls shared a room, and the 2 boys shared a room, all on the first floor. I was given a room on the ground floor that was right next to the dining room and kitchen. The doors to my bedroom had glass windows in them, and this is important for later with the encounter. Also, I want to mention that the stairs leading to the first floor were in the living room. I can see the bottom of the stairs from my bedroom looking through the windows and the bedroom doors and across to the dining room. One week, they decided they wanted to go camping for the weekend, and I didn't want to go. I'd made plans to meet up with some friends that weekend. As a teenage lad, hanging around with your friends seemed far cooler than spending time with the family. Anyway, that Friday night they left, and I went out with my friends for a while. We hung out, had a laugh, went home. I didn't have a drink or anything like that, and I was completely sober. I got home later that night, and I was alone. I was tired, so I went straight to my room and got in bed. I was lying there. House was empty, except for me. It was strange to have this much silence in what is normally a very busy house. As I was settling down in bed, I started to hear footsteps walking across the landing. You could hear one foot after the next. Boom, boom, boom. It sounded like they'd come from the bathroom all the way across the landing and then stopped at the top of the stairs. I didn't know what to do. My eyes were wide open and looking directly at the bottom of the stairs. My first thought was, there's someone in the house. A burglar, maybe. I wanted to get up and check, even just shout, hello, but I couldn't do it. It felt like something in the back of my mind was telling me not to move, not to make a sound. Survival instinct, maybe, or just fear of the unknown. Then the footsteps came back again, but this time they were coming down the stairs. You could hear the stairs creaking after each step, like they would if I was walking down them. My heart was beating out of my chest. This was all happening within minutes of me getting home. I thought this burglar had heard me coming into the house and was looking for me. The footsteps kept going. The stairs were creaking. I could hear that this person was close to the bottom of the stairs, and I was alone and frozen from fear. I thought there was nothing I could do against a fully grown man. What if he had a weapon? What can I do? I heard the final 3 steps as this person got to the bottom of the stairs. My eyes were glued to that area. And then I saw it. This was no person. Standing at maybe a little under 6 feet was this shadow figure in the shape of a man, but it had no facial features. It was just a dark silhouette, and it was even a little translucent. It had this eerie feel to it. It just stood there for what felt like forever, and it seemed to just be looking at the wall in front of it. It stood there still. I started to question myself. Am I seeing things? Then its head moved, and it looked towards the front door of the house. There was this slow movement, not a quick look to the side, and then it started to move its head back around and look towards my direction. And as soon as it did this, I just threw the blanket over my head, hiding under the covers. I did not know what to do. Do I climb out of my window and run? I've nowhere to go. I just stayed as still as possible and listened out for any movement. And then I heard its footsteps again. But it was not coming towards me. Oh, it was going back up the stairs. I felt a bit of relief when I heard it get to the top of the stairs. It then started walking along the landing, and the footsteps stopped when it got to the bathroom. I stayed hidden under my blanket, thinking about what to do. If I leave the house, where do I go? My family was camping miles away anyway. If I phoned my friends and told them about this, they'd just laugh at me and say I was crazy, not knowing what to do. I just stayed there, lying awake for hours, and I must have finally fallen asleep. I woke up the next morning still on edge. I could not get the image of these things out of my head. What was it? I've never seen anything like it before. I got ready and went straight out of the house. That night, I stayed over at a friend's house. I did not mention what had happened to any of my friends, as I didn't want them to think that I was crazy. I think it's wonderful that both this boy's parents were happy to explain to him that they'd seen things in the house. In the last case I'm sharing tonight, that's fascinating as well, and it features a homemade spirit board. And a different reaction from this boy's parents, as they too seemed to have seen something in the home. Although I don't think the Ouija board, whether it was homemade or not, was to blame. There must have been activity on the land before this, and the board just opened the door enough, for beings good and bad to enter. Our witness said, the Ouija board I made from a cereal box. When I was 12 years old, I made my own spirit board from the back of a cereal box. I used a bright red marker pen to print capital letters A through Z around the edges, and then numbers 0 to 9 across the middle. I put a yes and a no at either end. I had a plastic beaker for a planchette. I got some birthday candles from the kitchen cupboard, and I already had a box of matches and 2 secret lighters stashed in my desk. However, even with the curtains drawn and the light off, it was still very bright in my bedroom, so I didn't use them in the end. I was creative and morbid in equal parts for most of my childhood. I've always been that way. And there was no internet in those days. If you had an interest in this kind of thing, you were very much restricted in pursuit of information beyond the 4 or 5 books you could borrow from the library. So I closed the door, drew the curtains, sat cross-legged upon my bedroom floor. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Closed my eyes, cleared my mind. The silence settled. The corners of the room deepened. Is anybody there? I said aloud. I waited, both hands clasped over the top of the beaker. Nothing happened. I gave up, and because I thought maybe I'd try again later that night, I slid the thin sheet of cardboard underneath the mattress of my bed. Instinctively, I knew to keep it out of sight. I forgot all about it. And when things began to pick up, it still never clicked for me. It never occurred to me, I wonder if this has anything to do with the board. It started straight away. It was all over within a week. I was always the usual suspect in our house. To be fair, though, there was good reason. And it was natural, therefore, that when things began to happen, more often than not, I was the one that was held accountable for it. So I heard about most of what happened being there on the proverbial front line. In short, I always got the blame. One morning there appeared some dark coloured stains, what looked like tea, taking off across the cream white kitchen wall in a wide arc, all the way from the far corner and spotting the whole length of the ceiling overhead, as if someone had dipped their fingertips into cold teapot and flicked both hands over each shoulder. In the eyes of all, a willful act of careless vandalism. And so I was customarily dragged out and officially accused. It was just the type of baffling nuisance I was known for, the sort of thing I might do well, if left to my own devices. My eyes narrowed at the rusty brown spot sprayed across the ceiling. I accessed my memories of recent past. I don't remember doing that. At no point did I associate any of this with my craft work. Indeed, I'd forgotten all about it. It was all pretty textbook stuff. All the main key points topped off. Bumps in the night, doors left open that were supposed to be closed. At night, the drains would groan harder than normal. My dad would demand information on who was up and down the stairs all of last night, like a herd of elephants. It was always a sudden, short burst of mirror manifestation. Things like the dipping of fingertips into the teapot, the flicking the droplets onto, the clear white space. A very calm, conservative effort to produce a maximum effect. Looking back on it now, It all seemed to have been meticulously calculated to attract our attention over a short space of time. Unfortunately, it didn't work. To be honest, I don't know how long it went on for. For the most part, it must have been very mundane, unremarkable stuff. Thumping lightly on the wall in my bedroom just once, and then after 2 minutes or so had passed, you get another thump in exactly the same spot. Nothing you'd ever look twice at, nothing to cost anyone the peace of mind. It was easy to ignore, you know, who knows how often we did. We had a small Highland Terrier dog. He was really old, so no taller than anyone's knee, and far too old and overweight to try anything frisky. Now, to avoid disagreements with this elderly terrier, we'd fasten an old air staying guard to the door frame where she slept. So, to restrict the amount of urine pools we'd have to mop up when we'd, say, come back from shopping or something like that. One evening, we returned to the house from an evening shopping trip to find that this stair guard, waist height with adjustable screw function, was neatly unscrewed. It was still standing, but it was slanted about 5 feet away down the hallway from where it had been left, allowing the elderly terrier free run of the house, as if the stair guard had been taken hold of by someone's hands, like lazily towed behind them as far as they could be bothered or managed, and left it there, crooked against the stairway, very careless, but also very deliberate. The terrier could not have moved the gate, and even if she could, why bother pushing it so far down the hallway? My stepdad said it first. Well, must be a ghost then, he said, like he was joking, but he was not. And still, it did not occur to me. Still, I never saw the link. My mum found the board while cleaning my bedspread. Of course she did. She threw it in the outside bin straight away and confronted me when I arrived home from school. No wonder we've got a bloody ghost. I screwed my brow, peered into my memory of my recent past, and realisation dawned. Oh, yeah, I was well chuffed. For the first time in my young life, I felt the true satisfaction of a goal achieved, a job well done. My spirit board had worked after all. So you see, it wasn't me, all by my own self, beset by a hyperactive imagination and projecting adolescent daydreams all over the place. Indeed, I was none the wiser. Hapless, you could say, if you were being unkind. Bear in mind, I was 12. I made a spirit box out of a cornflake box and it didn't work. I hid it. I moved on to the next thing. I forgot all about it. And then things began to happen around the family home. Things that were noticed and remarked upon by others in the house who, and this is the crucial point, had no knowledge of my amateur dabblings in the occult at no point before nor during this earlier activity. It was not until my mum, pursuing her own sinister agenda, had come across the incriminating evidence and put it all together. And such was the nature of the evidence, and also the nature of what had gone on up until then. There was already the conclusion drawn by the adults in the house that something otherworldly was afoot, and more likely than not, the blame was mine. And so it turned out they were right on both accounts. But it didn't stop. It began the inevitable ramping up along the set trajectory, so concisely that you can look at other similar cases and pinpoint exactly where we are on the timeline just in time. As it turned out, before things got really nasty, this, in my own opinion, means that whatever the nature of our accidental house guest, they at least seem to be well versed in how these things are meant to go. Could it be that we were not their first rodeo? Maybe it was simple frustration. Why aren't they listening? Who knows? My mum was cleaning her teeth before work one morning. She was home alone in my tiny little upstairs bathroom, electric toothbrush buzzing away. This was the mid-90s. She hears in the adjacent bedroom she shared with my stepdad the sound of something solid rebounding hard off the full-length glass mirror of their wardrobe and hitting the floor with a thump and a thud. Toothbrush still buzzing in her cheek, she pokes her head round the door to see what was responsible, and it's lying on the carpeted floor, cracked in half from impact. It is a typically crappy piece of tat, that I'd bought her for Mother's Day that year from the local corner shop. Some sort of yellow duck holding an umbrella, kind of squatting inside a welly boot, or something like that. It might have cost about 50p. But being a sucker for this type of thing, my mum had given it a special place in a line of assembly with the rest of her tat on the windowsill. The windowsill on the other side of the bedroom, all the way across the full-size double bed. And it moved hard enough to crack it in half. Being raised in the kind of family that has a few stories like this, she knew enough to take it seriously right away. She'd already thrown away my spirit board to the outside bin as soon as she'd found it, and I'd been appropriately reprimanded. So that same day, she asked around at work if anyone knew what she thought or ought to do in these circumstances. Someone or other had asked if she still had the cereal box, and she said it was in the outside bin. He told her to get it out again as soon as she got home. Get a shot glass or something for your planchette. Then go somewhere quiet. Use 2 fingers on the top of the upturned base. Say goodbye. Wait a bit. Say goodbye again. Then wait another minute. Say it one more time just to make certain, and that should do it. So my mum considers then that it's been a day or two since she'd thrown the dratty thing away. A few weekdays' worth of family-sized leftovers had made their way on top of that cereal box by now. It'd be damp, probably moist to the touch, congealed gravy and grease, potato skin, pasta gone stiff, and she'd have to dig for it. Does it have to be the same one? She asks. He fastens his lower lip to his chin and he nods, solemn as a priest. My mum then considers that her eldest son, with his strange, morbid ways, is a nuisance. Anyway, after other 12-year-olds, she shouldn't wonder, who'd stash sweets under the mattress or cigarettes or dodgy magazines like that. Not me. Once upon a time. A silent decision is made with a sigh. I'm going to kill him, she said aloud, more to herself than anyone else. Thankfully, in the end, she did not. And after that, it stopped. All the activity ended. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the reports that I brought you tonight from my case files. I'm working on a new YouTube channel at the moment. Something along the lines of Confessions with Deborah Hatswell. I'll give you more of an update as we move forward on that one. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you'll join me for future episodes. I release content like this every week, and I'm sure I'll cover a topic you enjoy, so don't miss out. Hit that follow or like button. Please check out my YouTube and Patreon memberships for early or exclusive content, and you can find the link to them and my social media and donation sites in one handy link tree below. BBR is not funded, so any donation, no matter how small, is highly appreciated. So I will bid you adieu, and I will be back at the same time, the same day, with more from the BBR case files.